Today, I am interviewing Priscilla. She is going to share her story with us about a little bit about her past and then how it led her through her journey and where she is at today. And then we'll talk a little bit about how she and I met. It's a very interesting story. I'm really enjoying getting to know Priscilla. And I can't wait to dive into her story because I don't know all of her story. I only know little bits and pieces. So, Priscilla, welcome to Walking with the Chosen.
Thank you for having me. It's lovely to be here.
I can tell you have an accent. So, what part of Australia are you from?
I'm not sure whether you're familiar with Australia, but I live in a state called Queensland. So I live in the capital city of Queensland, which is Brisbane. Beautiful city. Still very hot over here while we head into autumn, but we've just gone through another little heat wave. So it's still, but yeah, I'm in Queensland. I think the best state. I'm sure some New South Welshmen would
They would argue.
argue that, but
That's awesome.
anyway.
I have yet to be to Australia. It's been on my bucket list, I guess. I hate using the word bucket list because it sounds like I'm going to kick the bucket, but I've always wanted to go there since I was in college, actually, 30 years ago. I thought someday I'm going to go to Australia, and I've yet to make that trip. That's a very long flight.
You know what? I hear most people say that, and it is a very long flight.
Uh-huh.
But it's a trip well worth it because it's a beautiful country, and I think as Australians we tend to take the beauty that we're surrounded with
Uh-huh.
for granted,
Yeah.
because we see it every day, like the Great Barrier Reef. That's 4 hours north drive
Yeah.
from where I
Yeah.
am. I go up there and I'm just like, it's just a reef. Other people from the world are coming over, going to be like, this is beautiful. you know,
We're not going to think it's just a reef. We're going to be like, I just want to sit here all day and just marvel at it, right?
exactly, exactly.
Okay, Priscilla. So let's share a little bit about who you are. You're from Australia, but give us a little bit more feedback and, just share part of your journey. Where were you before you started watching The Chosen? And I'm just going to let you talk and I just want to hear your story.
Yeah. Um, well, I'll probably go back to. I wasn't in a great spot before I came across The Chosen. Um, I know that we've sort of, as we've gotten to know each other over maybe the last 4 weeks prior to this show today, I know that my story is a little bit similar to yours, I guess, in terms of I was born into a Catholic family, raised Catholic, went to Catholic school, always had a really lovely, strong relationship with God, I guess, but there was some stuff that happened at the hands of the church that kind of, I guess, I moved away from the church. It was sort of more a rejection of the church, but not God, if that makes sense. So I understood even as a young child that there is man, and what man does is what man does. And then there's God. And the two don't necessarily mix,
Mm-hmm.
or what a man does is not necessarily the fault of God. So I always understood that and always had a relationship with God. Loved Jesus, but I guess growing up in that environment, he was the distant God. He
Mm-hmm.
was over there, I was here. I felt his hand on my life. I would talk to him, and I always believed in. I never stopped believing. Put it that way. So I guess that put me in good stead for what was to come. But about 8 years ago or so, I was after, and it was in quick succession. I call it going into my Job season. I understand that now, and it was truly a Job season because it was one affliction, one hit after another, starting with my father's death, which was very sudden. Um, I'd actually had a dream about it 2 months beforehand. Um, and, that's a whole nother story that we can talk about another time. But, yeah, basically, he passed away in January of 2014. And I think maybe about 3 weeks later, I went to bed perfectly healthy and woke up sick. And within weeks, I had been diagnosed with like one of the most rare and unfortunately with the worst prognosis autoimmune conditions called diffuse systemic sclerosis, which had no cure. And it hit me hard. It hit my organs hard. So very quickly, I went. I was in like kidney failure and 4 hours away from death. And
Oh, wow.
I don't know, the blood pressure thing that came with the kidney damage. And so, I was consequently diagnosed with like malignant hypertension, and then that caused a brain bleed, and it's gone on and on. So I know this is very difficult. I'm just trying to sort of compress it for you. But it was sort of one affliction after another and overcoming one thing. But say, for example, the kidney failure, that came from what they call a sclerodermic renal crisis. So that happens when your blood pressure shoots really, really high and your kidneys can't handle it. And it's this whole vicious circle with this whole autoimmune response that happens specifically with the illness that I was diagnosed with. And I say was because, I'm very happy to report, as I've started on this walk with the Lord, there has been a healing that's happened.
Awesome.
Which is amazing, but we can get into that, I guess. I'm just sort of trying to compress, I guess, for you, like the affliction after affliction after affliction, which just was the earmark of this Job season. At the same time, I was in an abusive and toxic marriage that I joke now and say, well, I think I actually married the actual devil. But I'm sure I'm not alone with women around the world that think that. But he was torturous. I called it was akin to torture. It was every day, and it wasn't a fun way to live when you were literally trying to fight for your life as well at the same time. So he was incredibly emotionally abusive. He was incredibly psychologically abusive, and then there was also the physical stuff that happened, and it was every day, and I was trapped, you know. So these things were happening, and then I'd just get over one health, and then I'd be hit with another thing. So it's like, okay, now you've got another autoimmune condition, Graves' disease. You've got to have a stem cell transplant. You've got to do this. It's just been a continuous hit after hit after hit. And if I don't know whether you've read the Book of Job yet, Shay, but
I've read the
you will
first couple
know
of chapters. Yeah, and it's like, oh
yeah,
my
there's
gosh.
42. It's long. I tell you
It
what,
is
when the
very
Lord
long.
led me to with this walk with the Lord, it was probably about a year in, and he led me to the Book of Job. And I tell you what, like, I had words with him after reading that book. I sort of closed the chapter and I was just like, I really have some strong feelings about this. Like, we might have to put this on the back burner and circle back to this in another year when I'm a little more mature than you, you know. So I won't give you, I won't do the spoiler alerts. I'll let you
Okay.
read the whole chapters.
Okay.
But yeah, in the Book of Job, so he, obviously there's the part where it's just the messengers that come to give him the bad news. It's just like one hasn't even finished giving the bad news before the next one comes along, and that's what my life has been like. Up until probably 2019. Ultimately, long story short, it was torture from all sides, and in 2019, I think it was probably, just trying to remember, might have been October or November. It was almost like the Lord parted the Red Sea, and I had a 2-hour window to get out of that situation in terms of the abusive. Over here, there's something called DB Connect, and I had been wanting to get out for a very long time. I had felt very trapped, very isolated. He managed to isolate me from my family. So this moment was like a real Red Sea moment, a parting of the Red Sea. And this was probably really the first, I guess, moment where I really knew he was pursuing me, the Lord was pursuing me. Because I got to the safe house, they changed my name. And the first thing I saw, Shay, on my YouTube, when I actually had a moment to breathe and sort of just start processing what had just happened, I opened up my YouTube, and no word of a lie, there was a love letter from your Father in heaven, and it had like 25 million views, and it was basically just that, a love letter saying, I love you. And so it's like I knew in that moment, okay, you are pursuing me, but I still hadn't turned to run to him at this stage. I
So you had
felt
no
closer to him.
connection. You weren't
Sorry.
you didn't have any connection, you weren't praying at this point in time, you weren't reading the
I was
Bible?
praying. Yeah, no, I was
You were?
praying.
Okay, okay.
And I was definitely connected to the Lord, but he was still that distant God, even
Mhm.
though, but this was I guess, this was a time where he was making himself very known to me. So I felt in that moment like, okay, I was being pursued, if that makes sense,
Yep,
that he
mhm.
was going to pursue me. But I was still a little bit, you know, and, a little bit deceived in terms of I was a little bit new age. So, I was looking into things there,
Yeah,
which I mean, consequently, when I actually drew close to the Lord, I understand how that opens you up to other aspects, and it made a lot of sense as to what was happening in my life at that point. But this went on for another few months, and I think might have been in 2020 sometime. I eventually got out of refuge, got my own place, sort of began again, because when I left my marriage, it I left with my animals and a bag. That's it. So I had to start completely again. I had absolutely nothing. So I was in the process of doing that, but along comes another autoimmune condition. I end up in hospital, and my doctors come in and go, "Do you realize you've had a heart attack?" And I'm like, "What?" They're like, "Yeah, no, there's been an issue with your heart, and you're in a thyroid storm, so you've got Graves' disease on top of all this other stuff that's happened." And it was just like, when is this ever going to end? When is this going to end? And I became quite depressed. And, I knew God was there, but he was sort of still over there. He was still
yeah,
a little bit the distant God. At least that's what I had kind of grown up being taught. God is not right there beside you. He's there. you know, I mean, I don't know how many times I was sent to hell by, by some not great people in my life. It's like, oh, off to hell for you. That's it. I don't know. I don't know whether you experienced that whole the Catholic guilt thing, but that was a
oh,
big thing in my family.
yes,
And I look, for whoever's listening, I actually love Catholics, and there's some real beauty about the Catholic religion, but it's yeah, I like my experience with it when I was younger was not great. And it's like, I'm not even saying that I wouldn't even go back to it, because I just recently I have really started to see the beauty in some of the sacraments and stuff. And obviously people like, just as a segue very quickly, people like Jonathan, who are just the epitome of what a beautiful Catholic should be.
yes,
You
mhm,
know?
mhm,
Like it's sort of shifted. I think there's just an organic shift that's happening
yes, mhm,
anyway with me. But yeah, back to in the 2020s, I think it was around 2020, I'm not sure exactly what month. I had become quite depressed, as you can imagine. It's just like, what am I doing wrong here? I was searching for God. I loved Jesus. I would talk to Jesus. I would call out to God, but I was looking in the wrong places. So, I was sort of looking in the new age, thinking that's how you can find God, and it just wasn't the case. So consequently, everything just seemed to be getting worse and worse and worse, and I got more and more depressed, to the point where and I was quite isolated. Like, a lot of my familial relationships were really fractured. Didn't have a lot of friends. So I felt very isolated and just very alone, and in this journey that I was in.
mhm,
And I sort of reached a point where because pain was, physical pain was a big part of this journey. I had morphine tablets as a PRN, so I could use them as needed. And I did only ever use them as needed. It was not something that I certainly didn't want to get an opiate addiction.
mhm,
But consequently, I had like a whole packet. And there was a particular day where I had just decided, like, this is it. I don't want to do this. It hurts to be alive.
mm,
I'm sorry, I'm probably going to get a little emotional. And there, I had made the decision to end my life, and I had put things in place. I was living in a set of units. I'd made arrangements because I certainly didn't want to be lying there for weeks and they find the smell. So I'd made arrangements for my neighbour to come. I was going to leave the key out so that my animals at least could be looked after, but I would be found the next day.
mhm,
And this was, like I said, I can't remember the exact date, but I'd made the decision this day that it was happening that evening, and I was just going to spend the day with my animals, and, you know, but it was happening. I was just going to take a number of pills and go to sleep. And if you know morphine, you don't need that much. It's it's going to take you out pretty quickly. So I had gone into the day a little sad, but there was, I don't know, I don't even know how to describe the feeling. There was a determination that my pain was ending that day. There was a determination. That's all I knew, is that it was ending that day. And I just went about my day, and I happened about lunchtime, I guess, happened to be on, just scrolling on YouTube, had my animals beside me. And for whatever reason, in my head, I heard The Chosen. So what's this? So I just, into the YouTube search engine, I just put The Chosen, because I don't know what. And the first thing that came up is episode 1, season 1. And I looked at it, and I literally, I looked up to the sky and I went, are you serious? Like Christian media, is that the best you've got to try and say? Is this what you're doing? And I literally, this is the conversation I'm having, going, are you for real? We all know this is real. Anyway, I said, look, you know what? I'm going to give you 5 minutes. I'll give it 5 minutes. That's what you get from me. I didn't need 5 minutes. I needed about a minute, and it got me. It pulled me in. I found myself, I think the quality of the and the production is the first thing that I really noticed. I'm like, this is not like other Christian shows. I went through, obviously, we know, I think most people listening will know that that episode. I think the thing that struck me pretty quickly, because like I said, he didn't need 5 minutes. I needed about a minute for it to grab me, but the thing that struck me is where Mary was. That's exactly where I was. That minute, that day. The pain I related to, and I know that as the program sort of, as the episode progressed, I there was a lot of looking up and just like, what are you up to here? Like, what are you doing to me? What? Yep. Anyway, it gets to the moment. It gets to the moment where she heads to the cliff. Mm-hmm. She's made that decision. And then she sees the dove. And in that moment, it's something that I'd actually forgotten about, but he brought it back to me. Like, my childhood, I came from a very abusive family. I was abused as a child. And about 14 years old, after sustaining a particularly brutal beating from my father, I bleeding and stuff, I had nowhere to run to but the church. So I went up to our local church, and I was sitting there and just on my own, and I remember looking up at the altar and looking at the crucifix, bleeding, and then I heard this cooing, and oftentimes there were, I don't know about why, but there were always pigeons and stuff in the architraves of this church. Yeah. And I heard this cooing at me, because I don't know how long I was sitting there, and I don't even remember what I was thinking. It was just, I don't know, bleeding and probably wondering why. But I heard this cooing, and it caught my attention. I thought, oh, it's a pigeon. And when I looked to my right, I swear to God, a dove, a white dove, was sitting there cooing directly at me. And so in the minute when Mary sees the dove, it's like this impartation dropped on me, and it was like he was saying, I was there then, and I'm there now. And I don't know whether I'm explaining it really well. I hope I am.
You are. Yeah.
I don't even, like, I was so stunned because I'd almost forgotten about that moment in my life where he literally sent me a dove when I was like 14 or 15 years old.
Yeah.
He literally sent me one back then, and it was like, I sent you a dove now, and I'm sending you a dove today. And I've been sending you doves every day for the last 30 years of your life, you know. if it makes sense, like in that moment, I realized the only reason that I'm still breathing after all the health issues and stuff and the affliction is because he's not done with me yet. He's not done with me. Does that make sense?
Very much.
Anyway, so I got that part. I started sort of crying. I was like, it was, I can't even put into words the feeling that I had. But I watched the rest of the episode, and I remember distinctly as she was in the bar, and I thought, oh, we're going to see Jesus, and I got really excited. I got really, really excited, and then the hand came in, and it's panned up, and he's like, that's not for you, and that was it for me. Like, it was, there was a release of pain that I had. And then as the rest of the episode finished, and there wasn't much, as you know, not much after that, but the moment where he called her by her name was another moment that sort of just punched it. I almost felt like I was punched in the heart, because I'd spent a lot of my life being called everything other than what I was, which is a child of God.
Yeah.
Particularly with my marriage, I was called so many things. And when that moment of deliverance for Mary was like it was a real moment for me, because I felt a physical presence, and I felt like I was being hugged. And I was being delivered in that moment, and what I had to give him, we've often heard, I think, we've heard Jonathan's story of surrender. My story of surrender is I had to give the Lord my pain. I had to give him all this stuff that I'd been carrying for so long, this stuff that was put on me, this pain that it was never mine to carry. And I had to just give it to him in that moment, and I did. And that, I'm telling you, Shay, I felt this physical presence hugging me that day. And I turned to him, and I've never stopped pursuing him since. He used that show, and I don't even know, Shay, I don't even know if like Dallas and the other writers realize how divinely they are being used at the moment. Like the Lord is literally putting people's real stories in their minds, in the creative aspect that he's then going to use later on to literally save someone's life. And I know my story is not unique in terms of that, but consequently I ended up binging the whole first season. Have been obsessed ever since. Went and bought a Bible the next day. And I think what changed me then, whereas as the Lord had been and so rightly reminded me, I was there, I've been there your whole life, I've had my hand on you. And maybe that's because I didn't just reject God outright when I kind of moved away from the church. I always loved God and loved Jesus. It's just in that moment I realized that he's not over there, he's right here. And he always has been. Does that make sense? I'm sorry to be such a whinger. Like, I'm just crying, but
That's okay. I'm crying too. I'm crying right with you.
I'm hoping that I've, because I mean, it's so, the story is so much more complicated than that, but I'm trying to sort of compress it for the purposes of
So
this.
so I'm curious, when this happened, did you take those morphine tablets and just pitch them or get them out of your sight? I mean, were you like got up from the episode and, felt God's hug, and did you just like, you're right, what am I thinking? I'm here on what happened?
I binged the whole first season.
Yeah.
And just, I spent probably a good 12 hours just crying. And that's what I mean about the surrender. I had to give him my pain. I had to give him that pain because I'd been carrying it for so long. And, the enemy comes at us. And I have a much clearer understanding of some of the stuff that I went through, when there is a specific purpose or anointing on your life, like the enemy's going to come. He's going to come. He's going to attack, and he will use friends, family, husbands,
Yeah.
to attack you, to try and break you down. And I think that's, kind of what had happened with me. Like there is certain, let's just say, I would say giftings that I've had since I was a child, and I think it's just one of those things where it's like, I was targeted in order to just crush me, because it's like you don't want this one to reach her potential,
Yeah.
for the Lord.
Yeah.
And I'm sure it's the same for you. I know we've had some brief discussions about that privately.
Hmm.
But yeah, so after I watched that, like I cried for like 12 hours, binged the whole first season. Thank goodness, I don't think it was very long before I had to, maybe a few months or something. I can't really remember exactly, but I know that I was so keen for the second season. I just could not wait. I could not wait. I went out and followed everybody. Suddenly it's the chosen, chosen, chosen. I followed everybody. But the thing it did was make me go, it made me go and buy my Bible. And I have spent every day in the Word since then, and I absolutely adore Scripture. I absolutely adore. I found untold comfort, untold understanding of the situation that I was in, or why certain things had to happen. And like I said, when he led me to the book of Job, there was some feelings I had about the book of Job, but I was like, if you're saying this is why this happened, I've
So
got some
tell us,
feelings.
you said there was a healing. So what happened? What led to the healing? When did that happen?
Well, it has been incremental as I've started this walk with him. This
Okay.
is not. I guess this is not like some people will get, and we can talk about like the little James thing. Some people get healed,
Hmm.
you
Yeah.
know, and those healings happen. With me, it was going to be incremental as I progressed in this walk, and because my relationship with the Lord is it's almost like under like a Abrahamic thing. So it's all about faith. It is just taking these faith steps, one step at a time.
Hmm.
Order my steps, and I will simply do that. And so I guess the surrender. It's Matthew 6:33. Seek ye first the kingdom and all its righteousness, and the rest will be added unto you. It's that actually in action, tangible, palpable. So as I progressed this walk, just everything in my life improved, everything improved. And in terms of healing, it's like, yes, this is an incurable disease, but my rheumatologist only recently is like, we don't need to see you anymore, because it's like nothing is showing in your blood. You don't have this illness
Huh.
anymore. Like, it's not there. It's left me with a little bit of damage to my organs because it was
Yeah.
quite severe and it was systemic, which I still deal with. So I'm still on some medications and things, but I stand in faith to this day that there is going to be healing there. And I think I don't know, I have a feeling that might be the big finale with me. But it's all happening incrementally. The graves, not showing anymore, gone.
Oh, wow.
It's just, so it's been, does that make sense? It's sort of been incremental as I've walked with him and trusted him and done this faith walk. And even if it didn't make sense, everything has improved. My health has improved. Like, if you had told me I would be running 4 or 5 kilometers a day 2 years ago, I would have laughed in your face and gone, ha!
Oh, yeah. Right.
It's just that's not gonna happen.
Yeah.
I should have been dead 3 times over, according to my doctors. So, I think when the Lord's hand is on you, it's on you, and we should never take that grace for granted. And that's what um, the chosen really, I think, brought back to me. Apart from giving me a moment of deliverance, the Lord really He used that show. And I know that that's not unique. I know that's happening all around the world with people.
Yes,
But
absolutely.
um,
So what,
consequently, sorry.
oh, I was just curious. So I know that Mary Magdalene must be a really important character for you.
Yes. Yes, she was.
What about when she, in season 2, when she went backwards for a while? Did that episode impact you as well?
Um, I understood that. It didn't impact me. I had looked at reactions of people and seen the impact. It didn't. I felt for her because obviously we've all been there.
Yeah.
I am of the mind that we fall short every day, which is why I lead a life of fasting, repentance every day. I start my day by actually handing it over to God and just going, you know, any sin or like I'm going to fall short today. You know this, Lord. So ahead of time, I'm asking for your forgiveness and repentance because I will fall short because I'm human,
Uh-huh.
despite my best efforts, you know. So
Yes.
I relate to Marion, and I really appreciate it. I think the writers putting that in because it's a very real struggle. And these people were real people. I know we see them on the pages of the Bible, but they were real people, and they would have had the same real struggles that
Yes.
every one of us have. And I mean, I really love that about what they've done with the show, you know,
Yes.
that's,
Uh-huh.
it's just made it so beautifully accessible, I think,
Is
by
there any
people that maybe
other
don't know God.
is there any other episode that has really hit you, like maybe even in season three? 'Cause I'm thinking of a
Yeah.
few that I'm like, you know, what
You know,
Edie
look,
went through, or what the bleeding woman went through.
well, you just named it. It was the Veronica episode.
Yes,
That
I
was
love
another
that
one that
episode.
really really got me because and like I said, there's actually not, each episode seems to hit me in a different way. It's something
Yes.
that it's that the Lord, at least with me, uses the show so powerfully that it will be something. Each episode deals with something that I've either just gone through within like weeks of that episode, you know?
Uh-huh.
So
Yeah.
it's dealing, and this is what I mean, he's really used that show to help me deal with any residual pain and things and to bring it out. So I spend a lot of time in tears when I'm watching it. Good
Me
tears, but
too.
tears nonetheless.
Yeah.
Tears nonetheless. The Veronica episode, that was a big one because I buried both my parents. I buried a lot of people that I love. I
Oh,
buried both my parents very young. And so that end scene, I've basically gone through the last, all this health issue without parents, and my
mm,
family relationship was very strained because of my ex-husband. So
mm-hmm.
yeah, I've basically gone through all of this stuff that I've sort of spoken about alone, you know.
Yeah.
So in that end scene when she said, I mean, I love that story, and when the minute I read the woman with the issue of blood, read her story, I related to it instantly
Mm-hmm.
in the Bible. But just it was that last scene where she's like, I'm no one's daughter.
Mm-hmm.
Boy, can
Oh.
I tell you, when he says, look up, you are, like, again, it felt like somebody come and slap me in the face and punch me in the gut. You know, I just
Oh.
went, and just the tears came again because I thought, yeah, I am. I may not have a lot of people in my physical, tangible life, but I have you. I have you,
Mhm.
and I trust that you will bring the right people to my life. You know, people that
Yeah.
I will be able to call family as I progress along this journey with you. So, there was that one, and then the Little James episode.
Yep.
The Little James episode, obviously, I think for obvious reasons, had a fairly large impact on me because the healing that I have experienced has been incremental. And
Mm-hmm.
at first, it's like I'm seeing other people just get healed, like, yeah. And it's like, why not me? Why not me? So
Oh.
it's been a journey to understand. And that, it was something actually, just funnily enough, about 2 weeks before that episode aired in my time with the Lord. There was something he really pressed on my soul, my spirit at that time. Just, it was a particular time that I was in sort of pretty deep prayer with him, but he sort of impressed on my spirit at that time. It's like I it was never a punishment. I sort of trusted you with pain rather than sentenced you to it. So
Mhm.
to have that episode air like 2 weeks later, it was almost a confirmation of what he had spoken to me. Does that
Mhm.
make sense?
Absolutely does. Yes.
So it was like he'd spoken that to me a few weeks before, and that was a confirmation of him just going, yeah,
It's
I,
funny how God works like that. I mean, it's funny the episode with Veronica, that came out right around, I think it came out Christmas night, because I was driving home to my parents' house on Christmas Eve, and I was like, you know what? I can't get through Leviticus, and I think I started on Numbers, and somewhere in one of those two books, I don't remember which one, it was talking about all the laws of the Jewish faith and about women when they're bleeding. And I remember thinking as I was driving home, I was like, what, why, God, why did you create these horrible laws that these people had to follow? I mean, women can't help that we're bleeding. You made us that way, you know. And I remember just questioning all that. And I personally experienced around 12 years, not solid bleeding, but really poor.
Wow.
I had fibroids. I ended up having a hysterectomy back in
Oh,
2019. And it was because I couldn't stop bleeding and I was miserable. So to that whole thing, I was just like, man, how would I survive all that, right? And I think I kind of knew about the bleeding woman, but I can't remember if I had read it or not. But then the very next night, what does God do? He gives me that episode. It's just like he does it all the time. He
yeah,
introduces me to something related to it, and then the next day, boom, I'm getting hit with it. And it's like,
yeah,
and that episode
and
hit me hard. I mean, I just couldn't imagine what she was going through, and I just felt for
yeah.
her so much. But did the Matthew episode with his parents, because you said your father was abusive. Did that episode impact you? Were you able to kindle any relationship with your parents before you said goodbye to them?
Look, I had actually, because I've got a very forgiving heart, and I think that's the way the Lord has simply made me. I had a very different. Like, I forgave my parents the minute it happened. My mum, she died quite young. She died in 2006. She was very young. She was only 58. She died of cancer after a very brave battle. I did, I very luckily, because I do have a forgiving heart, there was a real moment, maybe 2 years before my father died, where he came to me asking for forgiveness. You know, basically saying I was a terrible father, which was what I needed in order to go. Of course, I
Mhm.
forgive you, and
Right.
that opened up my relationship. So I was very lucky that in the last 2 years of his life, not only was there forgiveness, but I got to, rather than just interact with the father, I got to actually know the man, and he
Mhm.
became my best friend. So there was a lot of
Oh,
forgiveness there.
that's great.
Um, so I was very grateful for that. But he was taken very quickly. It was a massive heart attack, and like I said, the Lord had given me. I can look in hindsight now, but He'd given me a dream about that 2 months beforehand,
Mhm.
as well as what there was a forewarning. I think a prophetic forewarning of what was to come for me
Mhm.
in terms of
Mhm.
my own health issues. That I think this dream sort of centered more around like that. That was the his death marks the beginning of this period. I
Yeah.
didn't know it was a Job season, but it's like this is what's happening. So
Yeah. Yeah.
time to go through the purification and baptism through fire
Oh, wow.
is what I like to call it. But I just I don't know that I know that my story is not unique in terms of the chosen just being like it literally changing people's lives. But in my case, that day it literally saved my life.
Yeah, it did. Yeah.
And with hours to spare, and the Lord used it so powerfully that day. It was, yeah. Don't know what else to really say about it.
I'm sure your animals are thanking you that you didn't.
Yeah. Oh, look, that was. I mean, they were all like they have been. I don't know what I'd do without. You're a
Mhm.
pet owner yourself. I don't know what
Yes.
I'd do without because I have, and particularly over the last number of years since I've really been on the walk with the Lord. I don't know whether it's happened with you, but for me, and maybe it's just something to do with whatever my purpose as I'm
Mhm.
moving into my purpose. I'm not going to discuss too much of that now, but
Sure.
there's been a stripping away. There's been a
Uh-huh.
stripping away of things that are just not for me. And he's made that pretty clear. Like, this person's not for you. This person's not for you.
Mhm.
But it's also a faith thing. So it's like, if I tell you to get rid of that person, get rid of that person. So it's like, okay, late. Bye. so, um, so there has been sort of this, I guess, this stripping away. Um, and so I've spent a big chunk of time on my own, except I've had the animals. And so they're my
Mhm.
little best friends. They're
Yep.
my little companions. I don't know what I would do without them, as much as they can frustrate me at times.
So are you now one of those people like myself that just watches a show over and over because you get something out of it differently every time, in addition to the Bible study and everything else that you're doing?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I do. I do. Um, there are particular episodes I will watch more than others. Like, I've watched the
Yeah.
Veronica episode um, quite a few times.
Yeah.
And I think, obviously, for the reasons that I've stated, for really obvious reasons. That very first season one, episode one, will probably always go down as my um,
Mhm.
absolute favorite. You know,
Absolutely. Yeah.
yeah. But I am very much that way. But I'm also like a bit of a Bible baddie. So what The Chosen has done is it really led me to the Bible.
Me
So
too. Mhm.
you know, I start my day with the Bible, either audio Bible, as we've had conversations where it's like when I'm driving, because my work, I work sort of, I think I've mentioned it previously or briefly, but I work with like the disabled, mostly pediatric clients, so people with like kids with ASD and all this other
Mhm.
stuff in sort of the occupational therapy field. So I go to their homes to deliver the therapy and stuff, and so there's a lot of travel in between, and oftentimes I will have the audio Bible on, playing
Uh-huh.
instead of music, just listening.
Yeah.
So I kind of immerse myself in scripture because I don't know, I love it, and I get something new um, out of each book every time that I go through it,
Yeah.
So I love it. I love it. But yeah, I The Chosen is such a powerful show, and I don't even know whether Dallas and the rest of them understand how powerfully, truly powerfully they are being used. I've been sitting there in the lead up to this trying to think of a term, of what something that's gonna, be really definitive about the feeling that goes along with the power of this show. And the only thing I can come up with is palpable divinity. It's just, it's there. You can feel the power coming through this show, just drawing you
Mhm.
in. Like the Lord, His hand is all over it. I've not had a chance to see Jesus Revolution, but from what it seems like, His hand's over that project too. And
Mhm.
this is it's just such a very powerful moment in time. I think the Lord is using all this stuff. He's really starting to
Yes.
supernaturally flex, which I love. I'm just
Yep.
like, come on through, Lord.
Yes.
Come on through with this wicked world because this is ghetto down here.
Yeah.
It's
It
just
really does.
ghetto. Like,
Yeah.
sick of it.
I know. It's like I think as Christians and even those of us that like you, I was a believer, but I didn't have this faith that something changed. And my pastor brought it up one time at church. He said it's like when the veil is removed from your eyes, the word of God makes sense all of a
Yeah.
sudden. So now when
Yeah.
I open up the Bible, it's like, oh, and I never had that before. Before it was just like, ugh, I hate reading this. So
Yeah.
something changed in me, even though I believed in God. And I just feel like we're hungry for more. I'm getting ready to go see his only son next week, and I can't wait for that one. But it's like I'm like, where's the next one? Where's the next one? Start building all kinds of these stories and help
You're
draw
so
people in.
lucky.
We
You're
need it.
so lucky being in the States. You're so lucky because you get these, like I've seen His Only Son, which is the story of Abraham, because I really feel like I'm under sort of a Abrahamic covenant with the Lord. That's all a big part of
Oh,
my purpose. Um, Obviously that's like, oh, I want to see it so badly. I'm
yeah,
hoping Angel Studios will come out on the app, but
yeah,
you're
yeah.
so lucky. Like you're so lucky that you get to go and see these in theaters before we've got to wait months. Like I think on the
Uh,
20th of April, um, Jesus Revolution will finally hit the shores here, which I'll be there front and center. Like I cannot
you'll love
wait
it. You'll love it.
for that. I cannot wait for that. But yeah, I guess the thing that's changed, Shay, you just mentioned that. You said, I don't know what's changed, but it's the Holy Spirit. You're actually spirit filled now when you read the Bible because He's the one that helps you understand. And it's called the living word for a reason because once you are spirit filled and you've got the Holy Spirit is touching you, um, each time you read, like I know every time I go through, like say the book of Isaiah, there is something new that is being imparted or a new revelation that I'm getting or a new understanding. So
Hmm.
yeah, I think it's amazing. I think it's
Yeah.
amazing.
Well, thank you so much for being on here today and sharing your story. And I know it's going to touch hearts because you can't experience something like that. And to hear your story, we need that just as much as we need the chosen. We need people like you who are brave enough to come out and say, look, this is how my life has changed and how God worked in my life. Because there might be
Mm,
somebody else that just happens to hear this episode and they're like, Oh, wow, maybe I need you never know. This episode might come out, they might stumble across the podcast or the YouTube, and that could just be that one moment that they're like, "I really need to go check out the toes," and it saved her, what did she see in it? And we just never know. So thank you so much for being courageous
It's
and
okay.
being
Thank you
on
for having
video.
me. No, I know this has been like, I'm still sweating, by the way, but I've gotten a little bit more comfortable. It's more like I'm quite insecure about how I look and all that other stuff. So it's,
We all
like
are.
girly, horrible stuff, and it's just, yeah, cameras and me, not a good thing. But I'm happy. Thank you for having me today, because I trust that, the thing I think ultimately is I trust the Lord, and I trust that the Lord will lead whoever He wants, whoever He needs to this episode and this story,
Yep.
just the way that He's leading so many to the chosen. And we'll, thank you for taking the time to listen to me ramble and listen to my dog grumble in the background.